Your soulmate cut someone off after finding out. My beloved child, something happened behind closed doors that your soulmate never expected to face, and the truth they discovered about you forced them to make a decision that cannot be undone. Until recently, someone close to your soulmate had been quietly influencing the way they saw you. This person smiled whenever your name was mentioned, pretended to support the connection, and acted as though they wanted your soulmate to be happy. But beneath that calm appearance, they were planting doubts one careful sentence at a time. They told your soulmate that you were not serious, that your silence meant you had forgotten them, and that the bond between you existed only in their imagination. Your soulmate tried to ignore those words, but when the same doubts were repeated again and again, they slowly began questioning everything. Then one small detail changed the entire story. Your soulmate learned that while this person was warning them to stay away from you, they had secretly been searching for information about you, asking others about your life, and paying close attention to every sign that your connection was becoming stronger. That was the moment your soulmate understood something shocking. This person had never been protecting them from disappointment. They had been protecting themselves from what might happen when you and your soulmate finally came together. Don't skip, because what your soulmate discovered next was far more personal, and it explains why they cut this person off without offering another chance. The truth arrived through a conversation your soulmate was never supposed to hear. Your name came up unexpectedly, and the person they trusted began speaking differently once they believed your soulmate was no longer listening. They admitted that you possessed something they could not compete with. Not status, not appearance, not anything temporary, but a presence that changed your soulmate from within. They had noticed how your soulmate became quieter whenever someone misunderstood you, how they defended your character even during moments of confusion, and how every attempt to move on somehow brought their thoughts back to you. This person had seen the connection before your soulmate was ready to admit it. Instead of respecting it, they tried to weaken it. They exaggerated old misunderstandings, hid important information, and made ordinary delays appear like rejection. But the most surprising revelation was still waiting. Your soulmate found out that you had once done something kind for them without asking for recognition, and this person knew about it. They knew you had protected your soulmate's dignity during a difficult moment. They knew you had chosen silence rather than exposing something private. And instead of telling your soulmate the truth, they allowed them to believe you did not care. The discovery struck deeply because your soulmate realized that their distance from you had not been based on reality. It had been built on a carefully managed version of the truth. Stay till the end, because the exact reason this person wanted you separated reveals just how powerful your place in your soulmate's heart has become. What happened next was quiet, but final. Your soulmate did not create a scene. They did not argue for hours or demand endless explanations. They simply looked at this person differently, as though every hidden motive had suddenly become visible. For the first time, your soulmate understood why your name always changed the energy in the room. It was not because you had done something wrong. It was because your presence represented a future this person could no longer control. Your soulmate asked one direct question. Why did you hide what they did for me? The person hesitated, then tried to change the subject. That hesitation confirmed everything. Your soulmate had already seen enough messages, heard enough contradictions, and connected enough details to know that this was not a misunderstanding. It was a pattern. Every time you and your soulmate moved emotionally closer, someone introduced confusion. Every time your soulmate considered reaching out, that person offered a reason to wait. Every time your soulmate spoke warmly about you, the response was a warning disguised as concern. But your soulmate no longer believed it. Something huge is waiting for you, because cutting this person off was not only an act of anger or disappointment. It was your soulmate's first real act of choosing the connection over outside influence. They removed access, stopped explaining themselves, and refused to allow your name to be discussed by someone who had never respected the truth. In that moment, your soulmate was not simply ending a friendship or creating distance from a familiar person. They were closing the door on the version of themselves that allowed others to decide what they should feel about you. And now, your soulmate is sitting with a realization that has changed the direction of everything. They understand that you were not the source of the confusion. You were the person being misrepresented inside it. The memories they once questioned now feel different. Your kindness makes sense. Your silence makes sense. Even the moments when you seem distant are being viewed through a new lens, because your soulmate can finally see how much information was withheld from both sides. But there is one detail they have not yet revealed, and it is the reason their decision became so immediate. Before cutting this person off, your soulmate discovered that the interference had not begun recently. It started much earlier, at the exact moment this person realized your soulmate's feelings for you were deeper than anything they had felt before. They saw your soulmate saving something connected to you. They saw them revisit an old conversation. They heard them say that no matter how much time passed, something about you still felt unfinished. From that day forward, they began building distance between you, because they understood one truth before either of you openly accepted it. Once your soulmate saw you clearly, they would no longer be easily controlled by anyone else's opinion. That day has now arrived. Your soulmate has cut off the voice that kept turning love into uncertainty, and for the first time, they are preparing to face what they truly feel. But the next discovery is even more surprising, because your soulmate has just learned that you may have known part of the truth all along. And what you chose to do with that knowledge is about to leave them completely speechless. The moment your soulmate learned that you may have understood more than you ever revealed, every assumption they had made about your silence began to collapse. They had believed you stepped back because your feelings had faded, because you no longer cared enough to fight for the connection, or because someone else had taken their place in your heart. But the truth was nothing like that. You had noticed the interference long before your soulmate did. You saw the subtle changes in their behavior, the sudden hesitation in their words, and the way warmth would turn into distance after they spoke to one particular person. You could have confronted everyone. You could have exposed what you knew and forced your soulmate to choose sides. Instead, you remained quiet because you did not want to become another source of pressure in their life. You wanted them to recognize the truth through their own eyes, not because you demanded it. That decision, which once looked like withdrawal, now appears to your soulmate as one of the deepest forms of care they have ever received. Don't skip, because the evidence that revealed this was not a confession from you. It came from the very person your soulmate had just removed from their life. Hidden inside an old exchange was a message proving that you had tried to protect your soulmate from conflict, even when doing so made you appear distant. You had said that you would rather be misunderstood than become the reason they lost their peace. When your soulmate read those words, they went completely still. They realized you had been carrying the weight of a situation you never created, and instead of defending yourself, you protected them from the full impact of it. That realization did not simply change their opinion of you. It changed the way they understood love itself. What shocked your soulmate even more was the timing. The message had been written during a moment when they were most convinced that you had stopped caring. While they were listening to doubts, you were quietly making choices to preserve their dignity. While they believed you were ignoring them, you were stepping back to prevent more confusion. And while someone else was presenting your silence as proof of indifference, that same person already knew the real reason behind it. Your soulmate could no longer deny the pattern. Every misunderstanding had been carefully positioned to make you look emotionally unavailable, while your actions were telling the opposite story. The person they cut off had taken your patience and turned it into coldness. They had taken your respect and called it weakness. They had taken your decision not to expose private matters and used it to create a false image of you. But now the truth was visible, and your soulmate felt something stronger than regret. They felt admiration. They began remembering every moment when you could have reacted harshly but chose restraint. Every time you could have embarrassed them but remained silent. Every time you could have walked away with anger but left the door open with grace. Stay till the end, because this was the instant your soulmate realized they had not merely underestimated your feelings. They had misunderstood your strength. You were never powerless in this situation. You were powerful enough not to become what others expected. And once your soulmate understood that, the emotional distance between you began to feel unbearable. Your soulmate then made a second decision, one that no one around them saw coming. Cutting that person off was only the beginning. They began revisiting every conversation, every warning, and every piece of advice they had received about you. They started separating what they had personally experienced from what they had been told to believe. The difference was impossible to ignore. Their actual memories of you were filled with patience, honesty, and a strange sense of recognition they had never been able to explain. The negative image existed only in stories repeated by someone else. That discovery created a powerful shift. Your soulmate stopped asking, "What if I was right to stay away?" and began asking, "What if I lost precious time because I trusted the wrong voice?" That question stayed with them. It followed them into quiet moments. It appeared whenever they looked at their phone, whenever they heard a song connected to you, and whenever they remembered a sentence you once said that now carried a completely different meaning. Something huge is waiting for you, because your soulmate did not stop at understanding the past. They began planning how to correct it. They considered reaching out immediately, but fear held them back, not fear of you, but fear that they had waited too long. They wondered whether you would believe their apology. They wondered whether the damage could still be repaired. And most of all, they wondered whether your silence had finally become acceptance that the connection was over. But then another detail appeared, and it gave them a reason to believe the story was not finished. That detail was something small you had never removed. It may have been a saved memory, a familiar phrase, an object connected to a shared moment, or a quiet sign that only your soulmate would understand. To anyone else, it would have looked meaningless. To them, it was unmistakable. It told them that despite everything, you had not erased the significance of what existed between you. You had continued living, growing, and protecting your peace, but some part of you had preserved the truth. Your soulmate recognized it instantly because it connected to a promise neither of you had openly called a promise. It was a moment from the past when both of you understood something without saying it directly, that if the connection was real, time would eventually expose what confusion tried to hide. Now that moment had returned with force. Your soulmate realized that the person they cut off had failed. They may have created distance, but they could not erase recognition. They may have delayed honesty, but they could not replace what your soulmate felt when they finally saw the complete truth. And now your soulmate is preparing to do something completely different from what everyone expects. They are not planning to send a casual message or pretend nothing happened. They are preparing to reveal exactly what they discovered, admit how deeply they were influenced, and tell you why they finally chose to remove that person from their life. But before they do, there is one final truth they are trying to confirm, a truth connected to the person who started all of this. Because your soulmate has just learned that the interference was not motivated only by jealousy. There was a hidden promise, made long ago, involving you, your soulmate, and a future someone desperately wanted to prevent. What your soulmate uncovered about that hidden promise made the entire situation far more serious than they had imagined. The person they cut off had not simply been offering unwanted opinions or reacting emotionally whenever your name appeared. Long before your soulmate understood the depth of their feelings for you, this person had quietly decided what your soulmate's future should look like. They had imagined themselves remaining at the center of every important choice, every relationship, and every turning point. Then you entered the picture, and something shifted immediately. Your soulmate started thinking independently. They began questioning patterns they had accepted for years. They became more protective of their private feelings, more selective about whose advice they trusted, and more willing to imagine a life that did not require anyone else's approval. That transformation frightened the person who had been influencing them, because they could see that your connection was not temporary. It was changing your soulmate from the inside. So they made a private promise to themselves. They would do whatever they could to keep the two of you from becoming close enough to discover the full truth. Don't skip, because your soulmate found evidence that this promise shaped almost every misunderstanding between you. Certain messages were never delivered. Important details were shared too late. Your intentions were repeatedly questioned before your soulmate had the chance to ask you directly. Even moments that could have brought you closer were interrupted by sudden problems that appeared at exactly the wrong time. For months, your soulmate believed these events were coincidences. Now they can see that someone was watching the connection carefully and reacting whenever it became stronger. But the most shocking part was not the interference itself. It was the reason this person believed your soulmate would eventually choose you no matter what they did. Your soulmate discovered an old conversation in which this person admitted something they had never said openly. They had seen how your soulmate looked after hearing your name for the first time. They noticed the pause, the curiosity, and the strange emotional recognition that appeared before either of you had built a history together. At first, they dismissed it. But as time passed, they saw that your soulmate remembered details about you that they forgot about everyone else. They saw them defend you without realizing they were doing it. They saw them compare every new connection to the emotional honesty they had experienced with you. And one night, your soulmate said something that changed everything. They admitted that even when they tried to convince themselves that you were not meant to remain in their life, a quiet part of them still believed the story between you had not reached its true beginning. The person listening understood the meaning immediately. They realized your soulmate's feelings were not built only on attraction, attention, or fantasy. They were rooted in something deeper, trust that had survived confusion. That was why they began working harder to separate you. They believed that once your soulmate learned how much you had protected them, the connection would become impossible to control. Stay till the end, because that is exactly what has happened. Your soulmate now knows that you were never competing for their attention. You were waiting for them to recognize the difference between a connection that demanded proof and one that quietly remained true. This realization has made them question every choice they made while listening to someone else, and the answer is leading them directly back to you. For the first time, your soulmate is no longer focused on what others will think if they reconnect with you. They are focused on what it would cost them emotionally if they remain silent. That change is enormous, because until now, they had allowed fear of judgment to become more powerful than their own experience. They worried that choosing you would create tension, disappoint people, or force them to explain feelings they could barely explain to themselves. But after discovering the hidden promise, your soulmate understood that the tension had never been caused by you. It had been created by people who benefited from keeping them uncertain. You did not ask them to abandon anyone. You did not ask them to prove their loyalty through dramatic actions. You simply wanted honesty. And somehow, that simple request exposed every relationship in their life that depended on control rather than respect. Your soulmate can now see that cutting this person off was not an impulsive choice. It was the first boundary they should have created long ago. They have stopped answering repeated calls. They have ignored attempts to rewrite the story. They have refused to accept apologies that avoid responsibility. Every time the person tries to blame you, your soulmate becomes more certain that they made the right decision. Something huge is waiting for you, because your soulmate has also begun defending your name in conversations where you are not present. They are correcting false assumptions, revealing that you were misjudged, and making it clear that no one will be allowed to influence their feelings about you again. But their strongest decision is still private. They have chosen a specific moment to reach out, and what they plan to say will reveal just how deeply this discovery has changed them. Your soulmate has already imagined the conversation more times than they would ever admit. They know they cannot approach you with vague words, casual excuses, or half-truths. They understand that after everything you endured quietly, you deserve complete honesty. They want to tell you that they finally know why you stepped back. They want to admit that they trusted someone who did not respect the connection. They want to explain that cutting this person off was not done to impress you or win you back through one grand gesture. It was done because the truth made continued closeness with that person impossible. Most importantly, they want you to know that they now see the choice you made when you protected them without receiving credit. That part has affected them more than anything else. It has made them realize that you cared for them even when caring for them cost you closeness, understanding, and peace. Yet there is one thing preventing them from speaking immediately. Your soulmate has found another message, one written by the person they cut off after realizing the plan had failed. In that message, this person claims that you have been hiding one final truth of your own. At first, your soulmate believed it was another attempt to create doubt. But then they saw a detail that matched something from your past, something only you and your soulmate would recognize. Now they are torn between reaching out at once and discovering the full meaning first. Because this final truth is not about betrayal, rejection, or another person. It is about a decision you made for your soulmate long ago, a decision so selfless that once they understand it completely,